Alrighty, so we are on week 6. We're starting with files. Any questions about anything so far? We're good? Okay. Alright, so a couple of things I want to tell you, or remind you, because you're going to need it for these assignments that we have to do with files, or some of them at least. Okay, so just a quick review of strings and just splitting strings. So let's say, for example, we have some kind of a sentence, and the sentence is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to just add, there's one space in this one, I'm going to add 2 spaces here, 3 spaces there, a bunch of spaces in here. Okay, well, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split the sentence into words and put them in a list. I'm just going to say words is equal to sentence dot split, just like this. And then I'll show you the words. Print words equals words. And if I run this thing, it looks like that. So what does the split do? It goes in there and splits a string by any number of spaces. Okay, so very useful thing to do. In some of the files, and actually, let's see, which one is it? You have your split sentence, counts words. Okay, so your final project is Sunspots. Okay, and there's some other ones in there. The rest is just extra credit, and they're really interesting if you want to do those. I highly recommend it, right? So one of them is brute force password crack. It will have to do with splitting things. The GUI calculator is just making a real calculator with buttons and stuff like that. This one, read a web page, regex. This one teaches you how to connect to a web page, use Python to read all the HTML, which is going to be like a wall of text, and then use regex, which is regular expressions, to scrape for information. So basically, I actually use this program, or similar to this, when I needed to just send a bunch of emails to these different high schools in the area to advertise this summer camp I'm doing. So I will just go to tell the program, go to this web page, read all the emails, put them in, format them in a certain way, and then I just send a mass email to everybody. Okay. The data mining project. The data mining project is like the Sunspots on steroids. Okay, so the Sunspots got like 50 lines. The data mining project has a CSV file, which is a comma separated file, which has 1,031 lines and a lot more information in each of the lines. Okay, and then the Caesar cipher and the protein weight, those two deal with dictionaries. Dictionaries are something that's just built into Python. Other languages don't really have the dictionary thing existing into the language. But since Python does, I have some extra credit assignments that show you how to work with those. All these are really, really useful things to do. So if you have the time, if you've done everything else, I really recommend you do these too. Okay. Plus, if you do these assignments here, they're worth a lot of extra credit. So, and by the way, they're not that hard. All of the data mining project is hard, but I actually also have a video for it, which will guide you through what you need to do exactly step by step. So if you just watch the video, you can complete this assignment. I've made it relatively easy. There's a data mining video in there. Okay, so just go through it. That's worth 60 points. Okay, so if you want a lot of points quick, maybe you're a little bit behind or whatever, just watch the video, do the assignment that way. Okay, the brute force password crack, I give you so many hints. It's not a very trivial assignment. Okay. But it basically deals with splitting strings, putting them in a list, arranging words and numbers into possible combinations to guess passwords, and then converting them using MD5 hashing. And I have one set of hints, and if that's not enough, there's another set of hints which pretty much completes the whole thing for you. Just walk through it, and that's also a bunch of points. The GUI calculator, that might be a little bit more difficult, but I recommend you do that too. And then the Caesar cipher is pretty easy. Protein weight is kind of easy too. But I would say that the brute force password crack and the data mining project could be like a quick boost in points if you need them towards the end. Okay? All right, so let me go through some more strings and splitting strings. Right, so splitting the string by any number of spaces, that's what the split does. Split splits by any number of spaces, right, and puts the thing into a list. You can also split things like in the brute force password. Let's just have a look at it real quick. Okay, so the brute force password crack, there's a for assignment, click here, and there's if that does not give you enough hints, there's lots of hints in this one. So let's click on the first one. So the brute force password crack is you basically have a bunch of information for someone, right? And then also somehow you have obtained their hashed password in their computer. And this is something you can do. You can plug into a Windows computer. You can look at the hard drive. You can see the place where the password is saved. You wouldn't know what the password is, so you can't really log into Windows, but you can guess what the password is by, trying to guess a hash that matches this. Okay, and a hash is just basically an encryption. It's a one-way encryption, so there's no way for me to reverse engineer this particular number back into the original password. The only way to figure out the original password is if I just make a whole bunch of guesses and convert each guess into a hash, which this is the hash right there, and if any of my guesses generates the same hash that this is, then I know that my guess is the original password. And that's what brute force password cracking is. Okay, so just there's like a 2,184 possible passwords. We're going to use itertools, which is a library that exists into Python that allows you to permutate things or arrange them in different order. We're going to do it in groups of 3 because I tell you the password is 3 of these different things. And basically just follow the directions, and then towards the end we're going to convert each of these guesses into an MD5 hash. And MD5 hash is what I used to generate this one right here. Okay, Windows 7 never used MD5 hash, but the Linux operating system, a few years ago still used MD5. Okay, but now it's not strong enough. All right. So that's the brute force password crack. Just so you know, 30 points extra credit, right? So a lot of easy points. And let me get to the file business now. All right. Oh, by the way, that's the reason I went in there. So let's say the brute force password crack. And the hints. Let me grab one of these here. So yeah, you have a social security number or whatever. This is birthday. All right. This is my birthday. Right, so if I want to go split the birthday, I do birthday split is equal to, or let's call it list. List is equal to bd dot split, and this time I'm going to be splitting by forward slashes. Right, and I can show you print birthday bd list equals bd list. All right, if I run this thing, you're going to get another list. Whoops. I think I probably typed split. Yep. Split. Alright, so you get another list. So basically, by whatever you want to be splitting, you put it in quotes in there. That's what you're going to be splitting by. Okay. Similarly for the social security and then the phone number and all that other stuff. Okay. So that's just so you know, a quick refresher about splitting strings. Now let me get into files. Okay, files, let me start with files output. Okay, so just like we have an output to here, right, this right here, this is the same way that you can output to a file. In fact, a lot of times when you have a program that's going to generate a bunch of output in here, it's going to run too slow, it's going to freeze on you, right, because it's trying to use a bunch of RAM to store the information that it's trying to show you. And there's a quicker way for you to display that information. If you have, like, say, thousands and thousands of lines, just write it to a file. The program will be just instant. Just writes everything all at once. It won't hiccup at all. And then you can just open the file, like a text file, look at the contents, and that's how you look at the output. Okay, so if you have some kind of a sensor, maybe you're trying to measure something and the sensor keeps reading information, there's no point of it to just generate the output into the in the shell or whatever. It's better to save it somewhere. So that's one of the reasons why you want to output to a file. Okay, so how do we output to a file? Let's say we have I'm going to have my file equals open, and I'm going to open some, I'll call it some file txt, and this is on the desktop. So let me go to the desktop so you can see what's on my desktop. Alright, so on the desktop is the lecture 07 whatever, right? And there's no file yet in there, so I'll call it a file txt. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the file to read. That's what this R is for. And I'm going to say, alright, my file dot write hello, right? I'm going to close this thing and copy it, paste it again, and I'm going to add a little space like that, and I'm going to do world. Okay, I'm going to save this thing, and I'm going to run my program. Let's see what happens. Oops, no such file. Okay, sorry, my bad. I don't want to read it. I want to write to it. Right, so I'm not going to read. And by the way, if you're trying to read from a file, that does not exist, that's the error you're going to get. Okay, so you can't read from a file that doesn't exist. But you can write to a file that doesn't exist. Right? So I'm actually happy that this error showed up. So I'm going to save this, run it again, no error, right? So you can write to a file that doesn't exist, and if the file doesn't exist, you will create it. So this is the file right there, okay? Did I write anything to the file? Nope, there's nothing in the file, okay? The file is empty. Why is that? Well, it's the same thing as if I went in there and I opened up a Word file. I basically go into Word, right? I write hello world, or hello world, and even if I have a file already called a file.word, if it was originally blank and I just go and just close the file without saving, that's what you're doing when you're writing to a file in Python and you don't close it. All right, so in order for me to save changes, made to the file, you need to close it. Close it. Okay, so I just go my file, close, like this, save it, run the program again, then let me go look at it one more time. Click this, and there you go, hello world. Okay, and notice hello world is on the same line. So even though I went in there and I told it to write, right? Write one time, write another time, the write does not automatically insert a new line like print. So remember, print, anytime you do a print, it automatically inserts a new line, so that's why each print shows in a new line. The write does not do that. Okay, so let's go back to the right. Where did I go? Oh, there you go. Okay, so how am I going to insert a new line, you think? We are going to do this. I go in there, \n. Right? So that's like any other language, any other programming that you take. If you want to insert a new line, you just do this. Okay? In fact, the default print, watch, if I do this, print, open this, right? The default print ends with a \n. That's why it automatically inserts a new line. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do \n right here, right before a little space. I'm going to save it, run it again, and I'm going to go look at the file. And now the two words are in two separate lines. Okay, so that's how you insert a new line in when you do write. Okay, so what else can you do? Let's say I want to go in there and I want to do another \n, and I want to do my file that write a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's try to see what that does. Run it. Nope. And look at the error. Type error must be str, no, not int. So the error tells you can only write a string to a file. So how am I going to do this? I just go in there and I say, all right. So first of all, let me comment this out so you know that this doesn't work. All right. This gives you this error. Oops. The error that I get here is this. Okay. So can't write anything other than a string to a file. Okay, so I got to go in there and I'm going to go get this whole thing again, copy it, and I'm going to say str open and close parentheses. Now I'm casting the integer or whatever number I have into a string. I'm going to save it, I'm going to run it again, and now no error. Okay, so let's go have a look at the file, and now you have the number in there. Okay. Similarly, if you have a float, you have to cast it to a string. You can't write a whole list into a file all at once. Well, you could try, but it's not a good idea. Okay. What else? What else do I want to tell you? That's pretty much it as far as writing to a file is concerned. It's not really complicated. It's just like print, but you're writing to a file. Any questions? We good? Okay. All right. So the next thing that I want to do is actually, let me just write some other stuff. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to write another one, my file write, and I'm going to write, this time I'm going to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's good enough. Okay? And what I'm doing is, or let's do another one. I'm going to get this one. I'm going to write it this time without commas. Just with spaces. Okay, and I'm going to save this thing, and by the way, I should do new lines at the end of this. I can do plus, quote, quote, \n, right? If you're going to have multiple things that you want to write, you can separate them with pluses, right? You can also do this business. I can do my file write, let's say I want to do pi equals, and then here I'm going to do the percent point to f, and then here I'm going to do percent 3.14. Okay, and I don't even remember what pi is, but whatever. And then in here I can do plus a new line, that kind of stuff. Okay, so this notation, the percent f notation, is also allowed because you're basically getting this number here and you're inserting into a string, so it's okay to write a string, and then after that you're concatenating another string to this first string, so it still ends up as one big string, which is the same thing that we're doing here. You're concatenating one string and another string. And if you forget what concatenation is, it's when you do the plus with two strings, it turns into one big string. Okay, so I'm going to run this one more time, and no error. Let's go look at the file. And there you go. You got a bunch of stuff in there. Maybe I should have put a new line at the end of this thing. All right, run one more time. And why is it still not on a new line? There you go. Now it's on a new line. Okay. So that's writing to a file. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there. I'm going to show you how to read from a file, and it's pretty easy. Right? And you already saw that if you're trying to read from a file that doesn't exist, it gives you an error. So let's do file. So this is files input. Okay. So let's do this. So I'm going to go, let's just do file write, and this is file read. Okay. So now I'm going to try to read. So the file that you are trying to read from must exist. Okay, you can't write to a file that doesn't exist. So let's try to open a file that, so I'm going to use my variable my file first. My file my file equals, I'm going to do open, and I'm just going to copy this whole thing here. Paste it. And this time I just changed the W to R. Oh, and by the way, let's say I'm going to before I get into this, let's say I'm going to go in there and I do this. I'm going to reopen the file, same file, and I'm going to try to write to it again. Be nice if I copy, paste. Okay, so I'm going to open the same file that I wrote to originally, right? The contents of that file are these, right? And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to write to that file. And I'm going to say, all right, my file.write hello world, right? If I do this and then I close the file, what do you think is going to be the contents of the file when it's all said and done? Is the previous content going to be in it? Give me a guess. Yes or no? No one wants to guess? Fine, be that way. Okay, so I'm going to go in there, I'm going to save this thing, I'm going to run it. Alright, so the original contents of the file were all this stuff that I wrote. Okay, and then after that I close the file, I'm reopening the file to write, and then I'm writing this thing in there. Okay, so let's have a look. And everything else was wiped out. Okay, so the moral of the story is if the file exists and you're trying to write to it again, you're going to wipe out all the contents. So be careful what you're writing to. Okay, if you wanted to go and write to some operating system files, you could, and you're going to mess up your computer that way. Okay, so be careful. In fact, it's very easy to write a script that goes through all the files in the computer and just messes them up. So it's like a virus. Okay. All right. So this one I'm just going to take out. Put a little comments in there. Okay. So this one was if I write to an existing file, all contents will be erased. All original contents. Okay, so that's the moral of this story. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the next one, file read. And the first thing that I'm going to show you again is that if the file does not exist, so I went in there and I introduced the 2 into the file name, so that file doesn't exist, and I try to open this thing, you get an error. And it will tell you, no such file or directory, right? So the file has to exist before you can read to it. And so I'm going to go in there and fix it. I'm going to save it. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say file as string is equal to my file read, just like this. And I'm going to do print file as string equals file as string, run it, and these are the contents of my file, right? File as string. Okay, so what does the read do? The read goes in there, so read reads all of the file contents as one big string with new lines in it. Okay, and you could go in there and you can split the string by new lines, just like we've been splitting things up here. You can just go in there and tell, okay, split by \n, and that will split the string into a list of lines. Okay, but there is an easier way to do this as you're reading the file. Okay, so I'm going to go in there. So this is read the file as a string. I'm going to comment this out because you can only read it one time as something, right? So you can either read it as a string one time, or you can do what I'm going to do right now, which is to read the file as a list of lines. So read the file as a list of lines. And this is something that you're going to be using for your Sunspots project. Okay, so how does it go? You go, all right, my file, let's do this. file as list of lines is equal to my file that split lines. I think it's just like that. Let's see if it works. Print this, alright, is equal to this, and run this thing. Oops. Split. Let me go look at my syntax for this. Close. Close. Let me look at the lecture real quick for the syntax. Oh, you have to do read in the split lines. Okay, so you have to do my file that read dot split lines. Okay, save it, run it again. And now the file that I had created here, right? This is my first line, second line, third line, fourth line, fifth line, sixth line. Each of these lines is now split into a list, and now it's an element of the list, right? First line, second line, etc., etc., etc. Make sense? Really easy stuff. Okay, you just get the thing, read it, split it by lines, make a list out of it, right? That's why Python is very good for data mining purposes, because you can work with strings like this. If you try to do this in C++, good luck. Okay, it's not going to happen. Okay, you could do this kind of a thing with Java also. Java is also pretty good with strings, but you're going to have to write a lot more code to get it going. So that's why Python for data mining. So now that I have read this thing by lines, let's say I want to go in there and split these lines into different things, right? So the actual, let's say I want to show this line, the last line that I read. Okay, so I'm going to go in there and say, all right, last line is equal to file as list of lines. How do I find the last element on the list? Length minus 1. Okay, good. So len of the thing minus 1. That's my last line. Okay, and I'm going to print last. Let's just label it. Last line equals last line. Run it. All right, here's my last line. Okay, so this is what you have to do for the Sunspots project, because the Sunspots, let me show you. Sunspots. All right, which is the last thing that you have to do for the semester pretty much. You have a file called Sunspots, and that file looks like this. All right, so you have a bunch of lines. It would be nice if I download it. All right, there's your file. Okay, so you have a bunch of lines in there. What you have to do is you have to read the whole file, split it by lines, and then you have to look at each of the lines, ignore the year, right? Well, you're going to use the year for something, but what you have to do is you have to give me the average for the numbers in each line. Okay, so you just go in there, split the thing by spaces now. Okay, so in fact, let me grab one of these. All right, and I'm going to go in there so I can give you a better clue on what to do. So in this last write that I have here, \n, I'm going to do a my file write this stuff. All right, and I'm going to run the file again. And this is my last line now, right? Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to split that line by spaces. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the line. Okay, so now split the line by spaces. Okay, so I'm going to go line elements is equal to last line dot, and what am I going to split this by? Looking at this. Spaces. Okay, good. Yeah. So, and by the way, this is very important. This is why it's important for you to show yourself the data as you're working with it, right? So if you have a file with 1,000 lines, don't just assume it's working. Do a little print, show yourself, okay, this is my first line, this is my second line. Okay, this is my last line. All right, now what do I need to split this by? Well, I'm going to split it by spaces. So I'm going to go in there. So split, just like this, and I'm going to do a print line elements equals line elements. Okay, run this again. And there you go. Now I got my line elements, into a list. Okay, but notice how each of these has a little, single quotes around them. So what does that tell you? The strings, right? In Python, single quotes, double quotes, it's all strings. Okay, so if I try to do things like this, so let's say what I want to do is I want to find the sum of the data except the year, right, on that line. So let's do this. I'm going to say, all right, sum is equal to 0 for I in range from 0 to the length of line elements, steps of 1, and then I'm going to say sum is equal to sum plus line elements I. Okay, does this exclude the year? No. Why? Starting at index 0. Index 0, this is the 0, so we want to start at 1. Okay, so let me go back in there, correct this. Right? And then now let's see what happens. So I'm going to go try to run the program. And oops, unsupported operand type for int and a string. Which one is the int? The sum, right? Sum, I'm telling sum is equal to 0 initially, so this is an integer. And then when I'm trying to add these numbers, remember how you notice that there are strings. I can't add an integer and a string together. It doesn't know how to do it. Okay? It does know how to do it if I just convert the string into whatever I need. Right? So is it an int? What data type is this? Float. So I'm going to go in there. I'm going to turn them into floats. I'm just going to cast them. Float, just like that. And then after that, I'll show you the average, or let's do average is equal to sum divided by, do I divide by the length of list of elements? Will that do the magic? Or no? Why not? That includes 0, excellent. So if I divide it by this, I'm going to be dividing by one more thing that I need. So there's 12 months of data in there, and then the first thing is the label for the year. So if I wanted to take the average of these here, I need to divide by 12, but if I'm dividing by the length of the whole list, I'm dividing by 13. So what I got to do is, I'm just going to go and give it a -1. All right? That's it. Okay, that's pretty much all you got to do for the data mining project. And maybe I should have showed you the average. All right, so print average for year. Let's do this. Year, and then average. And then I'm going to do print underneath it. I'm going to say line elements 0. This is my year. And I'm going to put a little space in between. And then the average, and then run that thing. There you go. That's my average for this year, 32.29. You can round this thing. You already know how to round. So the actual final project that you have to do is you get this thing. You get the file, right? Read the Sunspot file, and then you're going to write the averages into another file called averages.txt, right? You're not going to do print like I showed you. You're going to write to another file. The other file is called averages.txt, and then you're just going to have year and average on top, and then all the actual values are underneath it, right? So you're going to have 1945 is the first year, then round this thing to 32.29. Okay, let me show you how to write. How to round thing. Actually, I already did. If I go to this, remember I showed you here. This is how you're going to be writing to a file when you want to round this thing to 2 digits. Okay. What else? That's pretty much it. What else do I want to tell you? I think that's pretty much all I want to tell you. Alright, so the rest of it is extra credit. So split sentence and count words. This is just to warm you up. That should be relatively easy. You know how to split, you know how to count. Just don't use the built-in Python functions. You got to use loops, for, I, and all that good stuff. Okay? So, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to stop it here and let you work on these. And let me know if you need help with anything. So, let me unplug this.